Have you ever walked through an old building and felt like the walls were hiding something, like there's a secret just out of reach, waiting to be discovered? Now picture this: what if those secrets weren't just part of the original design, but appeared out of nowhere, as if the building itself had changed its mind? It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but history tells us it's real. There are structures across the world, ancient temples, medieval castles, even forgotten chapels, that hide doorways no architect ever planned. These aren't just hidden passages meant for spies or treasure. These doorways weren't there when the buildings were constructed. They showed up later, and here's the strangest part: they only appear in buildings erected after massive solar events. Think about that for a moment. A burst of energy from the sun, millions of miles away, reaches Earth, and suddenly, stone and mortar respond in ways we still don't fully understand. These doorways don't follow the rules of architecture or physics as we know them. Some are perfectly carved, as if crafted by invisible hands. Others seem almost organic, like the building grew them. And they all share one eerie similarity. They're found in places that endured violent solar storms, events so powerful they lit up the skies and left scars in the historical record. What's behind these mysterious passages? Are they accidents of nature, or is there something more deliberate at work? This isn't just a story about odd buildings. It's a puzzle that ties together ancient history, cutting-edge science, and the very fabric of the world around us. Over the centuries, people who have stumbled upon these doorways have described everything from whispers on the other side to strange shifts in time and space. Scientists have theories. Some say it's electromagnetic anomalies. Others speculate about dimensions we can't yet measure. But one thing's for certain: these hidden doorways challenge everything we thought we knew about the places we live, work, and worship in. So let's step inside the mystery together. By the end of this journey, you might never look at an old wall the same way again. To understand how solar events could reshape buildings in ways that defy explanation, we need to look at what happens when the sun unleashes its fury. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections send enormous waves of charged particles hurtling toward Earth. When these collide with our planet's magnetic field, the effects can be dramatic, everything from stunning auroras to disrupted radio signals. But in rare cases, something even stranger occurs. Certain structures, particularly those built with specific types of stone or metal, seem to absorb and react to this energy in unexpected ways. Take, for example, the ancient temples of Hatusa in Turkey. Archaeologists documented strange, smooth passages appearing in walls centuries after construction, passages that didn't match the original craftsmanship. These anomalies were first noticed following a period of intense solar activity recorded in medieval astronomical logs. Similarly, sections of the Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland show sudden, unexplained archways that local legends claim opened during the Great Sky Fire, referencing a documented solar storm in the 1500s. The stone in these areas has odd crystalline formations, almost as if it was briefly melted and reshaped by an unseen force. Scientists studying these phenomena propose that the electromagnetic pulses from extreme solar events might temporarily alter the atomic bonds in certain minerals, causing them to shift or even heal in new configurations. Some theorize that materials like quartz, often found in ancient construction, could act as energy conductors, channeling solar disturbances into the very fabric of the building. But if that's true, why do these changes consistently form doorways, passages that seem designed for movement rather than random cracks or fractures? This brings us to the most compelling question of all: intention. Could these hidden pathways be evidence of a natural process we've yet to decode? Or is there something more at play? Some researchers point to ancient texts describing portals activated by celestial events, suggesting that past civilizations might have known more about this phenomenon than we do. Others argue that the doorways are simply a byproduct of chaotic energy, like lightning leaving fractal scars in sand. But with each new discovery, the mystery only deepens. What's certain is that when the sun speaks, the earth and the structures upon it may be listening in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. The Temple of Karnak stands as one of the most striking examples of this phenomenon, a place where history and mystery collide. In 1200 BCE, a solar storm of unprecedented scale lit up the skies over Egypt, recorded in priestly annals as the day the sun wept fire. Shortly after, something impossible happened. Workers maintaining the temple complex woke to find a new corridor where none had existed before, a passage so seamlessly integrated into the ancient stone that it seemed to have always been there. What makes this discovery so compelling isn't just the sudden appearance of the doorway, but the details preserved in hieroglyphic accounts. The priests called it the Path of the Gods, insisting no mortal hands had carved it. They described the stone as cool to the touch, yet humming like a plucked string, suggesting an energy signature unlike anything else in the temple. Modern archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar made another startling find. The composition of the stones framing this passage contains trace metals not found elsewhere in Karnak, including an unusual concentration of magnetite, a mineral known to interact strongly with electromagnetic fields. Could this be a clue to how solar energy reshaped the temple? Some researchers speculate that the magnetite acted as a conduit, focusing the storm's energy into the stone and triggering a molecular rearrangement. Others point to temple inscriptions describing rituals performed during celestial events, hinting that ancient priests may have understood how to harness these forces. But here's what defies explanation: the doorway's precision. Unlike cracks or fissures caused by natural stress, this passage curves in perfect symmetry, with edges so smooth they resemble polished glass. If this was an accidental byproduct of solar activity, why does it look intentional? Perhaps the most haunting detail comes from a fragmented stele found nearby. It warns that the passage opens both ways, a phrase that sparked debate for decades. Does it mean the doorway functions bidirectionally, or that something might step through from the other side? To this day, visitors occasionally report odd sensations near the site: a sudden drop in temperature, whispers in no known language, even fleeting shadows where none should be. Science can't yet explain these accounts, just as it can't fully explain why Karnak's hidden doorway remains undetectable by thermal imaging, as if it exists slightly out of phase with our reality. What happened in Karnak wasn't an isolated incident. Similar doorways appear in structures across continents, always following major solar disruptions. But this temple offers something rare: a written record from witnesses who stood where we stand now, grappling with the same awe and uncertainty. Their words bridge millennia, reminding us that some mysteries refuse to stay buried in the past. And as we'll see next, Karnak was only the beginning. Europe in the 14th century was no stranger to strange occurrences: plagues, wars, celestial omens, but few were as baffling as the sudden appearance of doorways where none should be. In the years following the massive solar storm of 1362, records from castles across the continent tell of corridors materializing overnight, often in the thickest fortress walls. Knights sworn to guard these strongholds wrote of stumbling upon arched passages that glowed faintly in torchlight, only to find them sealed shut the next morning. At Château de Coucy in France, a sentry reported walking through a doorway into a chamber he'd never seen before, a room lined with unfamiliar tapestries, before the exit vanished behind him, leaving him trapped until fellow guards heard his shouts. What makes these accounts so chilling is the consistency of the details. Chroniclers from England to Bohemia described the same phenomena. Doorways edged with a peculiar bluish stone that pulsed like a slow heartbeat, thresholds that emitted a low, resonant hum. Modern analysis of surviving castle walls reveals something startling. Many of these structures were built with iron-rich sandstone, a material known to interact unpredictably with electromagnetic forces. When the solar storm of 1362 struck, it may have temporarily altered the atomic structure of these stones, warping space within the walls themselves. But why would that distortion take the form of doorways, not cracks or rubble? One theory points to ley lines. Many of the affected castles, Montségur in the Pyrenees, Bran in Transylvania, even the Tower of London, were constructed atop these ancient energy pathways. Some researchers propose that solar storms supercharge these lines, creating brief windows where geomagnetic energy intersects with human architecture. Medieval builders, whether by accident or design, may have unwittingly positioned their fortresses at these volatile points. There's even evidence that certain castle chapels were aligned to celestial events, their altars placed precisely where solar flares would strike during equinoxes. Were these doorways the result of a forgotten science, a way to harness cosmic energy for some unknown purpose? The most haunting possibility comes from a fragment of a knight's diary preserved in the Vatican archives. He wrote of encountering a figure in one of these phantom corridors, a man in outdated armor who spoke no known language, yet seemed to recognize the castle's layout. When the knight reached out, his hand passed through the stranger as if through smoke. Could these doorways have been more than spatial glitches? Could they have been moments where time itself folded, allowing past and present to brush against one another? The solar storm's energy might have done more than reshape stone. It might have briefly rewritten the rules of reality. And if that's true, what or who else might have stepped through? The stones themselves might hold the key to this mystery. Deep within certain minerals lies a property that sounds like science fiction, but is very real: piezoelectricity. When materials like quartz or basalt are squeezed or stressed, they generate tiny electrical charges. It's the same principle behind your wristwatch or gas stove igniter. But here's where it gets fascinating. These stones don't just produce energy, they can also store it like a geological battery. Over centuries, the walls of ancient temples and castles may have absorbed traces of energy from earthquakes, shifting foundations, even the footsteps of countless visitors. Then, when a massive solar storm hits, that stored energy gets supercharged, releasing patterns that were imprinted in the stone long ago. Think of it like pressing play on a recording. The electromagnetic surge from a solar flare could act as that play button, triggering the stone to remember and recreate shapes that existed in its molecular structure, perhaps from earlier construction phases or even natural formations before the stone was quarried. This might explain why some doorways appear meticulously crafted while others look almost melted into place. Laboratory tests support this idea. When researchers exposed reconstructed walls made of piezoelectric minerals to controlled electromagnetic pulses, temporary fractures formed, not random cracks, but straight-edged gaps eerily similar to the doorways documented in historical accounts. Some lasted only minutes before the stone healed itself, while others remained, as if the energy had permanently rewritten the material's blueprint. But why do some doorways stay open while others vanish? The answer may lie in the intensity of the solar event and the unique recipe of each building's stone. Temples like Karnak used granite rich in quartz and magnetite materials that not only store energy well, but can also lock it into new configurations. In contrast, medieval castles often mixed iron-rich sandstone with softer limestone, creating a less stable matrix. Under solar bombardment, these composite walls might flicker between states, forming temporary passages that collapse once the energy dissipates. There's also the unsettling possibility that some doorways aren't truly gone, just inactive, waiting for the next surge of energy to reveal them again. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from modern experiments with memory alloys, metals that return to a preset shape when heated or electrified. Ancient builders couldn't have known about piezoelectricity, but they might have noticed that certain stones behaved unpredictably during thunderstorms or auroras. Could they have deliberately chosen these materials, hoping to harness celestial forces? Or were these doorways an unintended consequence, a quirk of physics that turned ordinary walls into something far stranger? Either way, one thing is clear: the stones remember, and when the sun speaks with enough force, they answer in ways we're only beginning to understand. Ley lines have long fascinated historians and paranormal researchers alike. These invisible threads said to weave across the Earth's surface, connecting ancient sites with uncanny precision. But what if these energy pathways aren't just symbolic? What if they act like cosmic wiring, conducting forces that can literally reshape the world around us? Take Stonehenge, for example. Sitting at the intersection of multiple ley lines, its towering stones have long been associated with celestial events. Yet less known are the accounts from the 1800s, when local shepherds reported strange, door-like openings appearing in nearby barrows after nights of intense auroras. These passages, described as too smooth for tools, vanished by dawn, but not before a few brave souls claimed to hear distant chanting echoing from within. The connection between ley lines and solar events becomes even more compelling when you examine their geographical overlap. Many of the world's most enigmatic structures, Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, the Great Pyramid, don't just sit on ley lines. They cluster at points where multiple lines converge, like knots in a vast energetic net. Modern LiDAR scans reveal something startling. Beneath these sites, the ground often contains dense deposits of conductive minerals, from iron-rich bedrock to underground quartz veins. When solar storms bombard these hotspots, the resulting electromagnetic surge might ripple through the Earth's crust, turning entire buildings into temporary conduits. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh recently simulated this effect, exposing scale models of ancient temples to pulsed magnetic fields. In structures aligned to ley crossings, the energy didn't disperse randomly. It focused along specific pathways, sometimes carving phantom corridors in the simulated stone. But here's the twist: some ancient texts suggest this wasn't accidental. The Vedas, India's oldest scriptures, speak of Vimana landing sites built where the sky's fire meets the earth's veins. Similarly, Celtic Druidic lore describes threshold stones placed at ley crossings to catch the sky's breath. Could these be metaphors for a lost understanding of Earth's energy grid? Archaeologists working at Bolivia's Pumapunku complex found evidence that might support this. The precision-cut andesite blocks their fit together so tightly that not even a razor blade slips between them, a feat requiring technology seemingly beyond the Tiwanaku people. Yet local oral history claims the builders didn't carve the stones. They softened them with star metal, then molded them into place during the Great Sky River, likely a reference to a documented solar storm around 600 CE. The most tantalizing clue comes from a recently deciphered Sumerian tablet. It describes temple construction aligning the gateways of men with the gateways of heaven during specific solar cycles. One passage explicitly mentions positioning door frames where the dragon's paths cross, a phrase modern researchers interpret as ley line intersections. If true, it implies a sophisticated science, one that could predict when and where cosmic energy might literally open doors in the fabric of reality. Of course, skeptics argue these are coincidences, that ancient builders simply favored high-ground sites with good sightlines. But then how do we explain structures like Newgrange in Ireland, where a 5,000-year-old passage tomb not only aligns with the winter solstice sunrise, but also sits atop a ley line that geological surveys show pulses with anomalous electromagnetic activity during solar flares? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between myth and physics. Just as we've rediscovered forgotten technologies like Roman concrete or Damascus steel, could ley line alignment be another lost innovation? A way to harness Earth's natural energies amplified by celestial events for purposes we can only guess at. The doorways that appear in these places might be more than architectural glitches. They could be glimpses into a forgotten dialogue between human ingenuity and the raw power of the universe. And if that's the case, the next great solar storm might not just light up our skies, it could reveal hidden passages in plain sight, waiting for the right key to turn. The 1989 solar storm didn't just knock out power grids, it may have rewritten the architecture of entire buildings. In the days following the March event, workers at a Manhattan skyscraper made a chilling discovery. A sealed-off hallway had reappeared overnight. Security logs confirmed no one had accessed the area, yet there it was, a perfectly intact passage leading to a room that defied the building's blueprints. Engineers found the space measured 12 feet by 15, with walls made of the same steel reinforced concrete as the rest of the structure, but with one eerie difference. The metal framework inside showed crystalline patterns, as if briefly subjected to extreme heat and pressure. This wasn't an isolated case. Halfway across the world, employees at a Tokyo office tower reported a similar anomaly, a service elevator shaft that shouldn't have existed, wedged between two floors. Maintenance records proved the shaft hadn't been part of the original 1970s design, yet there were scuff marks on the walls suggesting decades of use. Even stranger, the elevator buttons inside were labeled with numbers corresponding to non-existent floors. When investigators scanned the surrounding walls, they detected faint electromagnetic pulses still lingering in the concrete, matching the frequency patterns of the 1989 solar storm's peak activity. London's infamous Phantom Stairwell case adds another layer to the mystery. A pre-war bank building, renovated in the 1950s, suddenly developed a spiral staircase descending from a basement storage room, a feature absent from all architectural plans. Builders attempting to demolish it found their tools passing through the steps as if they were holograms, yet security cameras captured cleaners walking up and down the stairs for weeks before they vanished again. Geophysicists later discovered the building's foundation sat atop a network of iron-rich underground streams, a natural conductor for solar energy. Skeptics argue these are just bureaucratic oversights, old blueprints gathering dust in some archive. But the evidence keeps stacking up. Materials scientists analyzing the New York hallway noted something impossible. The concrete had fused with steel beams at a molecular level, something that would require temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet there were no signs of fire damage, no soot or warping. It's as if the solar storm's energy briefly reshaped reality itself, leaving behind these architectural glitches. What ties these modern cases to ancient temples and medieval castles? The materials. Every affected 20th century structure had one thing in common. They used dense, mineral-rich components like granite cladding, iron reinforcements, or copper wiring. When the 1989 storm hit, these conductive elements may have acted like antennas, channeling cosmic energy into the building's bones. Laboratories replicating these conditions with pulsed electromagnetics observed temporary softening in certain metal alloys, supporting the theory that extreme solar activity can momentarily warp man-made materials. But here's the unsettling question no one can answer. Why doorways? If this were random energy dispersal, we'd expect chaotic cracks or melted sections. Instead, we get functional passages, hallways, stairwells, elevator shafts, as if the energy follows some hidden blueprint. Perhaps the most spine-tingling detail comes from a night watchman's testimony in the New York case. He swore that before the hallway vanished again, he heard faint voices echoing from the phantom room conversations in languages that sounded both ancient and futuristic. Whether his account was sleep deprivation or something stranger, one thing's clear: when the sun speaks violently enough, the walls don't just listen, they answer. In 1952, a classified memo circulated among a select group of scientists working for the United States government. The subject line reads simply, "Architectural anomalies and solar phenomena." This was the beginning of a decades-long investigation into the very doorways we've been exploring, an investigation that, according to recently declassified files, yielded far more questions than answers. One document from 1963 describes a team attempting to recreate the conditions of a solar storm using massive electromagnetic generators. Their target, a reconstructed section of the Roslyn Chapel wall. The results were both astonishing and unsettling. For 37 seconds, observers reported a shimmering aperture forming in the stone, accompanied by a drop in temperature so severe their breath fogged in mid-July. Then, just as suddenly, it sealed shut, leaving no trace behind. Why keep such findings secret? The answer may lie in a series of redacted field reports from the 1970s, where agents described audible phenomena beyond certain doorways, voices speaking in reverse, fragments of radio broadcasts from future dates, even what one operative called mechanical sounds with no identifiable source. But the most chilling account comes from a 1981 experiment in Turkey, where researchers stationed near the Hatusa temple doorway recorded something impossible: a 5-second video clip showing a figure stepping through from the other side. The image was blurred, distorted by what analysts later determined was an electromagnetic field, but the silhouette was unmistakably human, wearing clothing that matched no known historical period. Whistleblowers from multiple countries have come forward with similar stories. A former French archaeological consultant claimed their team was ordered to abandon a dig at Chateau de Caussy after ground-penetrating radar detected a network of geometric voids beneath the castle voids that shifted position each time they tried to map them. In Russia, a retired engineer revealed that the Kremlin had maintained a secret division studying anomalous architecture since the Cold War, focusing on sites where major solar events coincided with reports of missing persons. Perhaps most telling is a leaked memo from the United Kingdom's National Archives, advising ministers that public knowledge of these phenomena could necessitate rewriting not just history textbooks, but physics itself. The greatest mystery isn't why governments hid these discoveries, it's what they feared might come through. Declassified files from the 1990s reference containment protocols for active doorways, including sound dampeners and Faraday cages to block electromagnetic signals. One heavily redacted report mentions an incident where a doorway in a Scottish castle remained open for 3 days, during which nearby compasses spun wildly and electronic devices played back recordings from World War II. Were these glitches in reality or something more? The truth might lie in a private research facility outside Berlin, where scientists allegedly built a replica of the Karnak doorway using piezoelectric materials. According to a single leaked photograph, their experiment succeeded in creating a passage, but what appeared on the other side was blacker than space, absorbing all light and sound until the structure collapsed 12 hours later. If history has taught us anything, it's that sunlight reveals far more than it illuminates, and when that light comes in the form of a solar storm, even the walls around us might start keeping secrets. The Explorer's journal entry is faded but unmistakable, dated 1887. It describes a moment that defies logic. After passing through a newly appeared archway in a Welsh castle, he found himself standing on a street lined with towering glass structures, vehicles moving without horses, and people clutching strange devices that glowed like captured lightning. His account, dismissed as opium-induced fantasy at the time, contains details too precise for coincidence. The air smelled of burning metal, and the sky was crossed by glowing lines like frozen fire. Modern readers can't help but recognize his description of neon signs and power lines, technologies decades away from existence. Even more chilling are the patterns in these accounts. A priest in 17th century Spain wrote of stepping through a monastery doorway into a sun-blasted desert where the stars hung wrong in the sky, only to stumble back moments later, his sandals filled with sand no geologist could identify. In 1934, a Norwegian electrician repairing wiring in an old church basement reported hearing laughter and music through a wall that shouldn't have existed. When he pressed his ear to the stone, the sounds shifted to screams in a language linguists later matched to a lost dialect of Gothic. These aren't just ghost stories. They're fractured moments where the rules of time and space seem to bend, all tied to one common thread. The doorways appeared shortly after documented solar flares. What makes these testimonies so compelling isn't just their strangeness, it's the physical evidence some left behind. The Welsh explorer's jacket was later found to be contaminated with microscopic particles of titanium dioxide, a compound used in 20th century paints. The priest's sand contained pollen from plants that wouldn't evolve for another 300 years. Even the electrician's tools showed odd magnetic readings, as if they'd been exposed to an energy field pulsing at frequencies modern science can't replicate. Skeptics argue these could be hoaxes or contamination, but the sheer volume of cases across cultures and centuries suggests something far more complex. The most haunting accounts come from those who didn't return unchanged. A blacksmith's apprentice in 19th century Germany vanished for 3 days after entering a cellar passage that gleamed like wet iron. When he reappeared, his hands were covered in intricate scars, not burns or cuts, but patterns resembling circuitry. He claimed to have worked in a forge of light where men shaped metal with blue fire, describing what we'd now recognize as arc welding. Before dying of an unexplained fever weeks later, he scribbled designs for devices no one could comprehend. One sketch, recently re-examined by engineers, bears an uncanny resemblance to a transistor, a technology decades away from invention. These aren't isolated fever dreams. They form a disturbing mosaic of glimpses into other times, other places, perhaps even other versions of our own world. The consistency in descriptions of humming corridors and air that resisted movement points to a shared experience transcending cultural context. Whether these doorways are accidental time warps, interdimensional shortcuts, or something beyond our current physics, one thing is certain: those who crossed their thresholds carried back fragments of realities that shouldn't exist. And if even a fraction of these accounts are true, the next great solar storm might not just open doorways in our walls, it could rewrite the very concept of now. The precision of sacred geometry isn't just about aesthetics, it might be the hidden language these structures used to converse with the cosmos. Take the golden ratio, that mesmerizing mathematical proportion found everywhere from seashells to galaxies. When architects incorporated it into temples like Cambodia's Angkor Wat or India's Brihadiswara, they weren't just chasing beauty, they might have been building antennas. These sites feature doorways and corridors aligned to the Fibonacci sequence, a spiral found in nature from hurricanes to sunflowers. But here's the twist. Many of these passages only reveal their full purpose during solar storms, when electromagnetic energy floods the stones. Researchers mapping these sites noticed something uncanny. Doorways that appear post-storm often align with the same geometric ratios as the original structure, as if the energy follows an invisible blueprint. At Angkor Wat, a previously hidden passage emerged after a solar flare in 1989, its arches mirroring the temple's iconic lotus bud proportions. Ground scans revealed the new corridor's walls contained quartz veins arranged in fractal patterns, a natural amplifier for electromagnetic waves, even more striking. The doorway's orientation matched the exact angle of the sun's position during the flare's peak, suggesting the geometry acted like a cosmic tuning fork. Ancient texts hint at this deliberately. The Vedas describe temple layouts as frozen hymns, their measurements designed to resonate with celestial forces. In Cambodia, inscriptions at Ta Prohm speak of gateways that wake when the sky bleeds fire. But how could builders without modern physics predict solar events? The answer might lie in observation over millennia. Cultures tracking solar cycles would have noticed patterns, correlations between flares and earthly phenomena like compass malfunctions or auroras. By encoding these rhythms into stone, they might have created structures that remembered how to react. Laboratory experiments support this. When engineers exposed scale models of sacred geometric designs to pulsed electromagnetic fields, the energy didn't scatter randomly. It concentrated along specific pathways, often tracing the golden ratio. In some tests, the energy even carved temporary openings in the simulated stone, edges perfectly aligned to the original proportions. It's as if the geometry acts like a stencil, guiding chaotic energy into orderly forms. Perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from a 14th century Armenian manuscript discovered in a monastery vault. It details the construction of a chapel where the walls breathe, advising builders to align doorframes using a cord knotted in Fibonacci intervals during the sun's anger days. Modern analysis of the site revealed faint traces of iron filings embedded in the mortar, a material known to enhance electromagnetic conductivity. Were these doorways meant to be temporary portals, activated when the heavens align? The stones keep their secrets, but one thing's clear: when geometry and cosmic fire collide, reality itself might bend to their conversation. The difference between a doorway that lasts centuries and one that vanishes by dawn might come down to what the walls are made of, and it's not just about durability. Structures rich in metals like iron or copper seem to hold onto solar energy's imprint like a photograph developing in permanent ink, while those built primarily of stone experience fleeting changes, as if the energy is writing on water. Take the iron-reinforced walls of Prague's Charles Bridge, where a hidden archway appeared after a solar storm in 1724 and never disappeared. The metal girders inside the stone show crystalline formations that geologists say could only form under extreme electromagnetic stress, essentially fossilizing the doorway into place. Compare that to the limestone catacombs beneath Paris, where multiple accounts describe passages materializing during solar events only to seal up days later, leaving behind smooth, featureless walls. Researchers drilling core samples from these sites found something fascinating. The limestone contained microscopic pockets of magnetite, a magnetic mineral, but in scattered, unstable clusters. When exposed to solar energy, these clusters likely realign just long enough to create temporary pathways before reverting to their original state. It's the architectural equivalent of a muscle flexing briefly before relaxing, a fleeting response to outside forces. This distinction raises a provocative question. Did ancient builders somehow intuit this difference? The Bronze Age temples of Malta, constructed with dense, metal-rich Globigerina limestone, show multiple permanent doorways aligned with solstice sunrises. Meanwhile, the sandstone pyramids of Meroe in Sudan, despite experiencing the same solar storms, only ever developed transient passages. Could this explain why certain civilizations prioritized specific building materials? A recently deciphered cuneiform tablet from Nineveh mentions selecting stones that remember the sky's fire, suggesting at least some cultures recognized this phenomenon. Modern experiments back this up. Materials scientists at MIT reconstructed walls using varying ratios of metallic ore to stone, then subjected them to electromagnetic pulses mimicking solar flares. The results were striking. Samples with over 15% metallic content retained new passageways, their molecular structure permanently altered. Below that threshold, changes lasted mere hours. Even more telling, the memory effect wasn't random. In high metal walls, energy carved geometrically precise openings, while low metal samples formed chaotic cracks. This implies that conductive materials don't just hold solar energy longer, they channel it with purpose. The implications are staggering. If we could map buildings with high metallic content along historic solar storm trajectories, we might predict where new doorways could appear. Satellite surveys of Rome's ancient aqueducts, for instance, reveal iron deposits in their mortar, matching the locations of legendary, vanishing fountains, sites where people reported disappearing through arches during thunderstorms. Similar scans of Japan's Edo period castles show copper-rich roofing tiles concentrated above areas where servants described phantom hallways. We might be standing atop a hidden network of dormant passages, waiting for the next solar surge to bring them to light. But here's the twist: sometimes materials defy expectations. The granite temples of Mahabalipuram in India, despite containing almost no metal, boast doorways that have remained open since a documented solar event in the 9th century. Geologists discovered why. The granite here is laced with microscopic tubes of liquid quartz, creating a natural piezoelectric effect that somehow locks in changes. It's a reminder that nature's rulebook always has footnotes, and that the next great doorway might appear where we least expect it. Quantum physics might hold the key to these architectural mysteries, and the answers are stranger than fiction. At the subatomic level, particles can become entangled, instantly influencing each other across vast distances, as if space itself doesn't exist between them. Now, imagine that same principle applied to the very fabric of a building. When a solar storm bombards Earth with high-energy particles, it doesn't just affect electronics or create auroras. It might temporarily rewrite the rules of matter itself. Some physicists propose that these bursts of energy could nudge certain materials into a quantum state, causing walls to behave less like solid objects and more like fluid probabilities. This isn't just theoretical. Particle accelerators like CERN have demonstrated that extreme energy can create microscopic wormholes, tiny tunnels where space-time folds back on itself. These anomalies last fractions of a second, but they prove that the fabric of reality is far more malleable than we once thought. Solar storms unleash energy on a planetary scale, billions of times more powerful than any lab experiment. If a controlled collision of particles can warp space-time in a detector, what might a natural cosmic event do to a castle wall saturated with conductive metals? The doorways we've been examining could be macroscopic versions of these quantum fluctuations, brief windows where dimensions intersect. String theory adds another layer to this puzzle. It suggests our universe might be one of many, stacked like pages in a book. Normally, these dimensions remain separate, but under enough energy stress, the pages could temporarily stick together. Ancient sites built with piezoelectric materials like quartz might act as accidental amplifiers, focusing solar energy into precise points where the barrier between dimensions grows thin. This could explain why some who have crossed these thresholds report impossible sights, landscapes with unfamiliar constellations, or architectures that defy known engineering. They might not be hallucinating. They could be glimpsing parallel versions of our world where history took a different turn. The most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: modern architecture. In 2018, a Tokyo skyscraper with a titanium alloy frame developed a mysterious corridor after a minor solar flare. Security cameras showed the hallway flickering in and out of existence for nearly an hour. When physicists analyzed the footage, they found something chilling. The light inside the passage didn't follow normal refraction patterns. Instead, it bent as if passing through a gravitational lens, a telltale sign of warped space-time. Even more bizarre, spectrographs revealed traces of elements not found on Earth, including an isotope of tungsten that only forms in supernova. Skeptics argue that these are coincidences, that our brains are wired to find patterns even in chaos. But the math tells a different story. Equations modeling solar plasma interactions with Earth's magnetic field suggest that under precise conditions, electromagnetic vortices could form spinning pockets of energy capable of twisting space itself. Temples built atop ley lines or fault zones might sit at the perfect convergence point for these vortices, turning them into accidental laboratories for quantum phenomena we're only beginning to understand. Perhaps the most humbling realization is this: if these doorways are glimpses into other dimensions or timelines, then every solar storm isn't just a celestial event, it's a key turning in locks we didn't know existed. And somewhere in a parallel world, another version of you might be staring at a doorway that just appeared in their own wall, wondering exactly the same thing. Ancient texts from across the world whisper of moments when the sky's fury reshaped the earth, not as destruction but as revelation. The Sanskrit Rigveda speaks of divya dwar, celestial doors that emerge when the sun's breath scorches the stones. Egyptian funerary texts describe the Gate of Ra's anger, a portal said to appear in temple walls during the god's fiery storms. At first glance, these might sound like poetic metaphors, but when you cross-reference them with astronomical records, something extraordinary emerges. The Book of Enoch's account of portals that appear when the heavens rage corresponds precisely to a documented solar superstorm around 1650 BCE. An event so powerful it left scars in ice core samples worldwide. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the Dendera Temple in Egypt. A recently deciphered papyrus scroll hidden in its crypts contains instructions for priests to stand clear of the western wall when the sky burns, warning that the stone may breathe. Archaeologists discovered that this exact wall bears strange, symmetrical grooves inconsistent with the temple's construction, grooves that mineral analysis reveals were fused by sudden, intense heat. Even more telling, the damage aligns with the orientation of a massive solar flare recorded in Chinese astronomical texts from 1282 AD. But why would ancient cultures encode this knowledge? The answer might lie in how they viewed these doorways. Unlike modern scientists who see anomalies, texts like the Tibetan Kangyur describe them as sacred intersections, places where the three realms meet. A Babylonian cuneiform tablet from the Library of Ashurbanipal details a ritual performed during solar eclipses, where priests would place copper rods against temple walls to draw down the door. Modern experiments show that copper, when struck by electromagnetic pulses, can generate temporary piezoelectric fields, exactly the kind of energy that might trigger a molecular shift in stone. Perhaps the most startling clue comes from the Ora Linda book, a controversial Frisian manuscript. It describes a time of great doors when wise ones walked through walls to learn from tomorrow. Skeptics dismissed it as fantasy until physicists noted its description of a shimmering path matches modern theories about quantum tunneling. Whether these accounts are literal or symbolic, one thing is clear. Ancient civilizations didn't just observe solar storms, they anticipated them, prepared for them, and possibly even harnessed them. The real question isn't whether they knew, it's how much they understood that we've yet to rediscover. In the sleek glass towers of today's cities, something ancient might be stirring. A handful of avant-garde architects working with cutting-edge materials, like self-healing concrete infused with conductive graphene or shape memory alloys, have documented anomalies that defy conventional physics. Take the case of a Berlin tech hub completed in 2021, where a section of smart glass wall suddenly developed a translucent archway after a moderate solar flare. Security footage shows the structure rippling like water before stabilizing into a perfect, arched passage, one that vanished 36 hours later, leaving no trace except a residual electromagnetic signature that matched patterns found in Egypt's Temple of Karnak. What's fascinating isn't just the similarity to historical cases, but the deliberate choices behind these modern materials. The Berlin building's facade contained nanoparticle coatings designed to react to sunlight, intended for energy efficiency, not dimensional instability. Yet when solar plasma bombarded those nanoparticles, they didn't just generate electricity, they rearranged the wall's molecular structure, however briefly, into a functional doorway. Similar events have occurred in Seoul's piezoelectric sidewalk tiles, where solar storms triggered temporary gaps that led nowhere, or at least nowhere on our current maps. One construction worker reported stepping through such a gap in 2019, only to find himself in an identical-looking alley, except the street signs were in a script he didn't recognize, and his phone's GPS placed him somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. He stumbled back seconds later, but the incident was quietly filed under equipment malfunction. This isn't confined to high-tech labs. Even conventional materials are showing unexpected behavior. A reinforced concrete apartment complex in Montreal developed a stairwell overnight after the 2023 solar maximum, despite engineering scans confirming no such space existed in the blueprints. Residents described hearing echoes of big band music drifting from behind the newly appeared door music that stopped the moment the stairwell vanished at dawn. Engineers discovered the rebar inside those walls had been manufactured using recycled iron from 19th century shipwrecks, metal already imprinted with decades of Earth's magnetic field fluctuations. It's as if the solar storm amplified those old imprints, temporarily rewriting the building's geometry to match some forgotten template. The implications are staggering. If we can predict and control this effect, architecture might leap into realms once reserved for science fiction. Imagine hospitals where emergency corridors materialize during disasters, or homes that adapt their layouts to solar cycles. A team at MIT recently proposed quantum mortar, a composite material preloaded with electromagnetic patterns that could guide solar energy into forming temporary doorways on demand. Early tests show promise. Under controlled pulses, their mock-up walls developed arches aligned precisely to pre-programmed fractal algorithms. But here's the catch: once opened, these passages don't always lead where expected. Sensors placed inside have recorded gravity fluctuations, temperature inversions, even brief bursts of radio signals matching no known frequency. Skeptics argue these are just high-tech parlor tricks, that quantum effects can't scale to human dimensions. Yet the same was once said about lasers and superconductors. Ancient cultures built with an intuitive understanding of materials were only now quantifying with electron microscopes. Maybe the real question isn't whether we can harness this phenomenon, it's whether we're ready for what happens when the walls start answering back. After all, a doorway is only as safe as what's on the other side. Folklore often holds hidden truths, and the stories of mysterious doorways are no exception. Across cultures and centuries, people have passed down tales of portals that appear when the heavens grow restless. In Ireland, old farmers still whisper about the fairy doors, thin places in the stone walls where the otherworld bleeds through, especially during the shimmering dance of the auroras. These stories aren't just whimsy. Historical records from the 18th century describe entire villages gathering to watch as cracks in ancient dolmens pulsed with light during solar storms, revealing corridors that vanished by morning. The indigenous peoples of North America carried similar warnings. Navajo elders spoke of spirit trails that materialized after the sky fire, a term that matches descriptions of intense solar activity. According to oral traditions, these pathways weren't meant for the living, they were conduits for ancestors or supernatural beings. One chilling account from the Hopi describes a hunter who followed a glowing doorway into a canyon, only to emerge days later with no memory of the event, his clothing seared with patterns resembling electromagnetic discharge. Even older myths trace back to Japan, where Shinto shrines built near fault lines were said to house kami no tabira, god doors, that unlock during celestial disturbances. A 12th century scroll depicts priests performing rituals to seal these passages after a solar storm, fearing what might slip through. The parallels are uncanny. Whether it's the hollow hills of Celtic lore or the stargates of Mesopotamian epics, these stories share eerie consistencies, sudden appearances, strange energy phenomena, and warnings about crossing the threshold. What's remarkable isn't just the consistency of these accounts, it's the practical knowledge embedded in them. Finnish folktales advise lining doorframes with iron during Northern Lights displays, a practice modern science validates. Iron's magnetic properties might stabilize electromagnetic fluctuations. Similarly, Mongolian shamans wore copper amulets when the sky road opened, metal now known to dissipate static charge. These weren't just superstitions. They were survival strategies, honed over generations of observing how solar fury reshaped the world. Perhaps the most haunting thread in these myths is the idea that some doorways weren't accidental. The Hindu Vimana Vidya texts describe temples designed as anchors for celestial gates, activated during solar maxima. Could ancient architects have been attempting to harness these forces intentionally? A recently discovered Incanquipu, a knotted recording device, contains a numerical sequence matching the 11-year solar cycle, suggesting they tracked these events with precision. Whether as reverence or warning, humanity has been documenting this phenomenon long before science gave it a name. And if the old stories are to be believed, some doors are better left unopened. The case of the French monk isn't an isolated incident, it's part of a chilling pattern that spans centuries. In 1685, a Spanish merchant named Esteban Ruiz walked into a cellar passage beneath his home during a documented solar flare, only to stumble out 3 decades later, still clutching the same oil lamp he'd carried inside. Witnesses swore his hair hadn't grayed, his clothes hadn't aged, and his lamp's flame still burned as brightly as the day he disappeared. When questioned, Ruiz insisted he'd simply turned a corner and stepped back out, unaware that half a lifetime had slipped away. Even more baffling are the accounts where time seems to flow backward. In 1812, a British cavalry officer chasing a fugitive through the ruins of a Norman castle reported seeing the man dart through a crumbling archway, an archway that hadn't existed since the castle's destruction 2 centuries prior. The officer's memoir describes following the fugitive into a fully intact great hall filled with people in medieval garb, only for the scene to dissolve moments later, leaving him alone in the rain beside the original rubble. Historians later matched his description of the hall to pre-demolition sketches, down to the placement of a distinctive stained glass window. These aren't just ghost stories. Modern forensic analysis adds disturbing credibility. When archaeologists examined the Ruiz family cellar, they found the stone walls contained unusually high concentrations of magnetite, a mineral known to distort electromagnetic fields. Ground-penetrating radar revealed faint, concentric circles in the masonry, resembling the ripple patterns left by high-energy particle impacts. Similar traces were found at the Norman castle site, where soil samples showed brief spikes in radioactive isotopes consistent with solar storm fallout. The most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: clothing. Textile experts studying garments worn by time-slip victims note peculiar anomalies. The French monk's habit, preserved in a Bordeaux museum, bears stitching techniques that hadn't been invented when he first disappeared, yet carbon dating confirms the linen threads are centuries older than the stitches holding them together. It's as if the fabric existed in multiple time periods simultaneously, its very threads tangled across the years. Physics offers possible explanations, though none are simple. Some theorists point to quantum superposition, the idea that particles can exist in multiple states until observed. Under extreme electromagnetic stress, this property might briefly scale up to human dimensions, allowing people to superpose across timelines. Others suggest these doorways are knots in space-time, where solar energy momentarily loosens the fabric of reality. The most haunting theory comes from researchers studying white holes, the hypothetical opposite of black holes, where matter and energy emerge rather than vanish. If solar storms could create microscopic white holes in conductive materials, they might serve as fleeting exits from other eras. Yet for all the scientific speculation, one detail unites every disappearance: the doorways always appear near structures built with intentional precision. The monastery where the French monk vanished was renowned for its astronomical alignments. The Ruiz cellar walls were laid in a sacred geometric pattern still visible in infrared scans. Even the Norman castle ruins show evidence of being constructed atop a Neolithic stone circle. This suggests these phenomena aren't random. They're drawn to places where human craftsmanship accidentally or intentionally created the perfect conditions for reality to flex. The implications are staggering. If these accounts are even partially true, then solar storms don't just affect our technology. They might temporarily rewrite the rules of time itself. And somewhere in the world right now, another doorway could be waiting, its threshold quivering with potential, ready to rewrite someone's future by sending them into the past. Military interest in these phenomena isn't just modern speculation, it's documented, deliberate, and shrouded in secrecy. Declassified files from both the United States and Soviet Union reveal chillingly similar experiments conducted during the height of the Cold War. One operation, cryptically labeled Gateway Project, involved teams of physicists and archaeologists working at historical sites across Eastern Europe and the American Southwest. Their objective: to replicate the conditions of major solar storms using industrial-grade electromagnetic generators, attempting to force open doorways in ancient stone structures. A 1968 Soviet memo details an experiment at Bulgaria's Perpykan complex, where scientists pulsed the megalithic walls with electromagnetic fields matching the intensity of the Carrington event, the massive solar storm of 1859. Witnesses reported a 3-meter archway materializing in solid rock for approximately 17 seconds, during which thermal cameras detected a temperature drop of nearly 40 degrees Celsius inside the passage. The most disturbing detail comes from a technician's handwritten note. Subject D4 reported hearing marching sounds and metallic clanking from within. No source identified before closure. The archway hasn't reappeared since, but core samples taken from the site show permanent crystalline restructuring in the granite. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, American efforts centered on Choco Canyon in New Mexico. Recently uncovered Defense Department contracts show that between 1959 and 1971, the military installed massive Tesla coils around Pueblo Bonito's curved walls, a structure already notorious for its mysterious doorways that ancient builders deliberately sealed. Declassified footage from Operation Sky Torch shows the coils firing in sequence during a lunar eclipse, creating an electromagnetic standing wave. What happened next exists only in redacted reports, but a civilian geologist working nearby that night described seeing blue arcs connecting the canyon's ruins like a spiderweb before a previously unknown chamber became briefly visible within the thickest wall. The real mystery isn't that these experiments occurred, it's why they abruptly stopped. A 1974 CIA assessment concluded that while doorways could be induced, they were unpredictable in duration, destination, and biological effects. One heavily redacted section mentions a test subject who stepped through an artificial portal in Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel replica, only to return hours later with third-degree burns in geometric patterns, and a pocket watch stopped at a date matching a solar flare from 1892. Whether this was a hoax or a horrifying breakthrough remains classified. What we do know is that research didn't end, it just went deeper underground. Satellite imagery from the 1990s reveals suspicious construction at Nevada's Tonopah test range, a full-scale replica of Karnak's hidden doorway built from piezoelectric composites, complete with copper wiring matching descriptions from Egyptian temple texts. Former contractors whisper about resonance trials where certain frequencies made the mock-up thrum like a struck bell, though no one will confirm if anything ever came through. The most telling clue might be in plain sight: the Pentagon's recent patents for electromagnetic void stabilization systems and temporal displacement shielding, filed by the same research division that once ran Gateway. The implications are staggering. If militaries could reliably create and control these doorways, the strategic advantages would redefine global power structures. Instant troop deployments, unhackable communication channels through folded space-time, intelligence gathering from historical or perhaps parallel timelines. No wonder the research remains compartmentalized behind black budgets and plausible deniability. Yet the very fact that these experiments continue suggests something extraordinary. We may be closer to understanding these phenomena than anyone publicly admits. And if that's true, the next great solar storm might not just reveal hidden doorways, it could unveil who's been walking through them all along. The hum comes first, a deep, resonant vibration that makes your bones tremble before your ears even register the sound. Witnesses near these mysterious doorways often report feeling the noise more than hearing it, a subsonic pulse that sets teeth on edge and sends animals fleeing. In 2017, seismic sensors placed around Stonehenge picked up something extraordinary. In the hours before a minor solar flare, the stones began emitting a frequency of 110 Hz, the same pitch found in ancient Tibetan singing bowls and medieval cathedral choirs. Stranger still, when researchers played that frequency back through speakers aimed at the monument's center, thermal cameras captured brief distortions in the air, like heat haze twisting into archways that vanished when the sound stopped. This isn't coincidence, it's physics. The Great Pyramid of Giza resonates at 432 Hz, a frequency once thought sacred by cultures from Babylon to the Maya. Modern experiments reveal why, when sound waves at this pitch strike limestone saturated with quartz, they create standing waves that can briefly alter the stone's density. Solar storms might supercharge this effect. During a 2021 test, physicists bombarded a pyramid-scale model with electromagnetic pulses while playing its resonant frequency. The result, a 1% localized gravity dip enough to warp space-time at a microscopic level. Scale that up to a structure like the pyramid, with its tons of conductive granite and shafts precisely angled to channel energy, and suddenly those fleeting doorways don't seem so impossible. Ancient builders might have understood this better than we realized. Hidden chambers in Newgrange, Ireland, contain stone spheres etched with spiral patterns that match the waveform of the mound's resonant frequency. Mayan temples in Palenque feature whispering galleries where a hand clap at the base of the stairs triggers echoes that precisely match the frequency needed to vibrate the building's iron-rich sandstone. Even more telling, these acoustic hotspots align with solar events. The Maya recorded sky drums, their term for solar storms, in codices that also describe rituals performed in these echoing spaces. Were they trying to harmonize with celestial forces? Cutting-edge research suggests they succeeded. The Pentagon's declassified acoustic gateway experiments used infrasound arrays to pulse the Rosslyn Chapel's famed musical pillars at their resonant frequency of 256 Hz. Security footage from the classified trials shows the chapel's apprentice pillar emitting a blue glow before the air around it seemed to fold for approximately 8 seconds, long enough for a laser beam fired into the distortion to register on a detector placed somewhere else. The beam's travel time indicated it had crossed 11 meters of space instantaneously, as if the sound had temporarily punched a hole through conventional physics. But here's what keeps scientists awake at night. Some of these frequencies don't just open doorways, they seem to attract something. Navajo elders warned against chanting certain tones during auroras, claiming it called the Star People. In 2019, a research team in Turkey playing the resonant frequency of Hatusa's hidden doorway recorded anomalous EMF spikes and what sounded like metallic scraping from within solid rock. Most chilling of all are the ultrasonic recordings from Chavin de Huanta in Peru, where a labyrinth of ducts channels wind into a chorus of precisely tuned notes. When solar activity peaks, these passages emit frequencies that make the entire temple complex vibrate like a struck bell, and according to local legends, sometimes something vibrates back. The implications are staggering. If sound can shape reality at these scales, we might be standing at the threshold of a lost science, one where architecture wasn't just built to last but to sing. And when the right note meets the right storm, the walls themselves might answer in ways we're only beginning to hear. Religious traditions across the globe have long woven these mysterious doorways into their sacred texts, not as anomalies but as ordained passages. In the Vatican's heavily guarded archives, a 12th century manuscript describes the Porta Coeli, a glowing arch that materialized in the Basilica of St. Peter during a solar storm in 1184. According to the account, Pope Lucius III witnessed the doorway emit a celestial choir before 3 figures in radiant robes emerged, delivering a message lost to time. The parchment concludes with a warning: these gates open not by man's hand but by heaven's breath. Similar stories echo through Eastern Orthodox monasteries, where frescoes depict saints stepping through golden thresholds that pulse with star-like light, a motif scholars now link to documented oral events. The Islamic tradition carries its own version of this mystery. The Kitab al-Miraj, a medieval text detailing the Prophet Muhammad's night journey, mentions doors of light appearing in the walls of Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque during the sky's great burning. Modern researchers examining the mosque's foundation stones found unusual electromagnetic signatures matching solar flare patterns from the 7th century. Even more intriguing, the descriptions align with Hindu accounts of Deva Dwaras, divine gates, said to open in temple walls during eclipses. A recently translated palm leaf manuscript from Kerala details specific rituals performed near these portals, including the placement of copper plates etched with fractal patterns. Laboratory tests show these designs act as primitive frequency guides, resonating precisely with the electromagnetic pulses of solar storms. But here's where faith and physics converge in unsettling ways. Indigenous Australian Dreamtime stories describe sky ancestors entering our world through rock formations that sing during fire rain. Geological surveys of these sites reveal high concentrations of telluric crystals, minerals known to amplify electromagnetic energy. When anthropologists compared these oral histories with solar event timelines, they found a chilling correlation. Every doorway legend coincided with a major solar maximum. The Navajo concept of Nihidil Hill, or the place where gods descend, mirrors this understanding. Elders still mark certain canyon walls with hematite pigments, a magnetic mineral they claim steers the sky path straight. Scientists analyzing these sites detected residual magnetism strong enough to deflect compass needles, suggesting these markings weren't symbolic, they were navigational beacons for something beyond our perception. The most provocative evidence comes from Tibet's hidden monasteries. Monks guarding the so-called Iron Door of Shambhala perform an annual ritual during solar equinoxes, striking the door's metallic surface with quartz-tipped mallets. Acoustic analysis shows these strikes produce frequencies that match Earth's Schumann resonance, the planet's natural electromagnetic heartbeat. Local chronicles claim the door last opened during the Carrington event of 1859, when witnesses reported seeing a city of crystal spires through the threshold. Skeptics dismiss this as high-altitude hallucination, but recent LiDAR scans of the door's surface revealed microscopic fusion marks consistent with plasma discharge. Perhaps the most profound question isn't whether these doorways exist, but why every faith describes them with such eerie consistency. From the rainbow bridges of Norse mythology to the jade gates of Taoist scripture, the imagery remains the same: a luminous passage, a divine messenger, and a warning about thresholds not meant for mortals. Science may one day explain the mechanics, but the deeper truth might lie in what these stories share: an understanding that the universe is far stranger than our categories of sacred and secular can contain. After all, when a doorway opens in a church wall or a temple floor, who's to say whether it's physics or divinity stepping through? Those who step through these doorways, or even stand near them when they appear, rarely walk away unchanged. Witness accounts describe a spectrum of psychological shifts, some subtle, others profound. A common thread runs through their stories, an uncanny sharpening of intuition, as if the experience rewired their perception. Take the case of a Chilean architect who encountered a glowing archway in a Santiago office building after a solar flare in 2017. Before that day, he'd never put stock in premonitions. But weeks later, he began dreaming in precise, hyper-detailed sequences of events that unfolded exactly as dreamed months afterward. Neurologists examining him found gamma wave activity typically seen in long-term meditators, pulsing in brain regions associated with temporal awareness. Time itself seems to unravel differently for those touched by these phenomena. A nurse from Oslo who stumbled upon a stairwell that shouldn't exist in her apartment complex reported something even stranger than the doorway's appearance. Her watch, a precision mechanical piece, began running backward at exactly half speed after the encounter. More unsettling, she developed the ability to sense solar flares hours before telescopes detected them, experiencing them as pounding migraines that faded the moment the storm hit Earth's atmosphere. Medical scans revealed her brain's parietal lobe, the area linked to time perception, had developed unusual cross-connections with her visual cortex, as if her neural wiring had been temporarily scrambled and reassembled with new pathways. Scientific studies of these witnesses reveal patterns that defy conventional psychology. EEG readings consistently show theta wave surges mirroring those observed in near-death experiences, along with heightened activity in the pineal gland, an organ long associated with metaphysical traditions as the seat of the soul. Researchers at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies made a startling discovery when analyzing brain scans of doorway witnesses. Their default mode networks, the brain system responsible for our sense of self, displayed unusual quietness, akin to advanced Buddhist monks in deep samadhi. This might explain why so many describe feeling unshackled from time during their encounters, as if the usual boundaries of identity had briefly dissolved. But the most haunting effects aren't physical, they're existential. Survivors frequently report a lingering sense of duality, as if part of them remained on the other side of the threshold. A Tokyo taxi driver who drove past a phantom alleyway during the 2012 solar maximum described meeting his own doppelganger in the rearview mirror, a figure that mimicked his movements with a half-second delay before vanishing. Psychologists initially dismissed it as a stress-induced hallucination until sleep studies revealed something extraordinary. During REM cycles, his brain produced bilateral synchrony, a state where both hemispheres operate in perfect unison, something previously documented only in gifted synesthetes and savants. Perhaps consciousness isn't just perceiving these doorways, it might be shaping them. Quantum consciousness theories suggest that under extreme electromagnetic conditions, the observer effect could scale up, causing reality to bifurcate at macroscopic levels. In layman's terms, the act of witnessing the anomaly might lock it into existence, however briefly. This would explain why so many accounts describe doorways responding to human presence widening when approached, humming when touched, or vanishing the moment skepticism creeps in. Ancient texts hint at this interplay. Tibetan monks guarding the singing doors of Mount Kailash have long insisted the passages only open for those who see without thinking, a practice modern neuroscientists recognize as inducing gamma-wave coherence. The implications ripple far beyond individual experiences. If consciousness and cosmic events can conspire to bend reality, even momentarily, it suggests a universe far more participatory than we've dared to imagine. Not just a world where doorways appear, but one where the mind holds the key, and sometimes the key remembers the shape of the lock long after the door has closed. Earth's restless crust might hold the key to why some doorways appear more frequently in certain regions. Structures built along fault lines or volcanic zones seem to act like lightning rods for these phenomena, their foundations already humming with pent-up energy. The science behind this is startlingly clear. When tectonic plates grind against each other, they generate piezoelectric charges in the surrounding rock, creating natural electromagnetic fields. Now imagine what happens when a solar storm supercharges these already electrified zones. The results aren't just cracks in walls, they're temporary tears in the fabric of reality itself. Japan's Tohoku region became ground zero for this eerie convergence in 2011. As the devastating earthquake shook the seafloor, satellites recorded a simultaneous solar flare bombarding Earth's magnetosphere. In the chaotic days that followed, rescue workers and survivors reported something beyond collapsed buildings. They described shimmering archways appearing in the ruins, passageways that glowed faintly before vanishing. One firefighter's account stands out. While searching a collapsed department store in Sendai, he swears he stepped through a doorway that shouldn't have existed, emerging into an intact version of the building from years earlier. Geological surveys later revealed the site sat directly above a previously unknown quartz vein, a natural conductor that may have focused both seismic and solar energy into a single reality warping point. The pattern extends far beyond Japan. Turkey's ancient city of Hierapolis, built atop steaming mineral springs, has long been a hotspot for doorway sightings. Roman historians wrote of pilgrims disappearing into temple walls during the gods' fiery visits, events modern researchers have linked to both seismic activity and solar maxima. When archaeologists scanned the famed plutonium chamber with ground-penetrating radar, they detected electromagnetic anomalies matching those found at Tohoku, pulsing in sync with nearby fault lines. Even more telling, the chamber's gateway to the underworld only emits its deadly vapors during periods of high solar activity, suggesting the deadly gas might be a side effect of deeper dimensional instabilities. What makes these geological intersections so volatile? The answer may lie in something called stress memory. Just as metals retain microscopic patterns from their forging, rocks under constant tectonic pressure develop electromagnetic imprints that solar energy can reactivate. Laboratory experiments at Stanford University showed that when samples from earthquake zones were subjected to electromagnetic fields mimicking solar flares, they didn't just fracture, they developed temporary zones of altered density, almost like localized wormholes. One researcher described it as poking a vat of gelatin and watching the spoon sink through without breaking the surface. The most compelling evidence comes from Chile's Atacama Desert, where the driest place on Earth meets one of its most active fault systems. In 2015, miners working near an old nitrate plant reported a corridor appearing in a solid salt cliff after a minor quake coincided with a solar flare. What makes this case unique? The doorway remained stable for nearly 3 weeks, long enough for scientists to document its properties. Thermal scans showed the salt inside had crystallized into perfect hexagonal patterns, a structure normally requiring millions of years of pressure. Even stranger, instruments detected faint neutrino emissions particles that usually only appear during nuclear reactions or cosmic events. The doorway eventually collapsed, but not before leaving behind an indelible question. Are we seeing nature's accidents or the awakening of some ancient planetary-scale architecture we've yet to comprehend? Perhaps the most unsettling implication is that these hotspots might be deliberate. From the cave temples of Ellora to the megaliths of Peru, many sacred sites sit precisely where solar and tectonic energies converge. Were ancient cultures drawn to these locations by instinct, or did they possess knowledge we're only rediscovering? The stones aren't talking, but during the next great solar storm, they might just open their doors. The race to recreate these mysterious doorways in controlled environments has led to some of the most cutting-edge and unsettling experiments in modern physics. In a nondescript facility outside Zurich, a team of materials scientists and quantum engineers spent 3 years constructing what they called the solar echo chamber, a room-sized apparatus designed to simulate the exact electromagnetic conditions of historic solar storms. Their breakthrough came in 2017, when pulses from high-energy lasers intersected with precisely tuned magnetic fields, creating something no one expected. For approximately 3.7 milliseconds, surveillance cameras captured a vertical shimmer in the air, a distortion that matched witness descriptions of emerging doorways down to the distinctive blue-white edging. What made this experiment unique wasn't just the visual anomaly, it was how the materials responded afterward. The researchers had lined the chamber walls with samples taken from sites where natural doorways had appeared. Limestone from Karnak, iron-rich sandstone from Chateau de Coucy, even fragments of the Rosslyn Chapel's musical pillars. These primed materials reacted dramatically, emitting brief bursts of coherent light and producing ultrasonic frequencies matching those recorded at ancient sites. Most puzzling was what lead researcher Dr. Elissa Vogt termed the stone memory effect. Once exposed to artificial solar conditions, these materials became increasingly sensitive to subsequent electromagnetic pulses, as if the initial event had trained them to respond. Parallel efforts at Stanford's high-energy laboratory yielded even stranger results. Using a modified particle accelerator, physicists bombarded reconstructed medieval mortar with proton beams mimicking solar flare particles. High-speed cameras recorded microscopic fissures forming in precise geometric patterns, not random cracks, but branching networks that resembled archaic symbols for doorways found in Templar ruins. Even after the energy pulses ceased, these patterns remained faintly visible in spectroscopic analysis, glowing under ultraviolet light like invisible ink. The team's most startling discovery came when they placed a copper coil near the samples during testing. The metal spontaneously twisted into a perfect double helix shape, a configuration that materials science insists should require impossible heat and pressure. But perhaps the most haunting replication attempt occurred in Japan, where a team from Kyoto University blended nanotechnology with ancient techniques. Knowing that many sacred sites used powdered meteorite in their mortar, the researchers created a composite material infused with iron-nickel microspheres similar to those found in asteroid fragments. When subjected to electromagnetic fields comparable to the Carrington event of 1859, the material didn't just distort, it developed a temporary region of negative density. Instruments registered gravity fluctuations consistent with theoretical wormholes, and for 1.2 seconds, a laser beam fired into the material's surface failed to emerge on the other side. The lead physicist later confessed in his private notes that the experiment left him with an unshakable sensation of being watched, despite the sealed lab being empty save for equipment. These experiments share a common, unsettling thread. The more accurately researchers replicate historical solar storm conditions, the more the phenomena resemble descriptions from ancient texts. A declassified DARPA report from 2019 even suggests that certain materials might act as cosmic tuning forks, vibrating in harmony with solar activity patterns that repeat over centuries. This could explain why some doorways appear to follow cycles, emerging during solar maxima or specific planetary alignments. Laboratories have only scratched the surface of this mystery, but one thing's becoming clear: when human ingenuity comes close to mimicking the sun's fury, reality itself seems to take notice. And sometimes, according to those working in these facilities, reality looks back. The photograph is grainy but unmistakable: a man in a crisp 1920s suit standing in the arched doorway of a Welsh castle that hadn't been inhabited for centuries. His wristwatch glints in the sunlight, an anachronism that sent historians into a frenzy when the image surfaced in a forgotten attic trunk. But here's what makes it truly unsettling. The castle's caretaker swore the doorway in the photo didn't exist when the shot was taken. It appeared overnight after a minor solar flare, lingered for 3 days, then vanished without a trace. This isn't just a case of a misplaced modern tourist. It's one of dozens of documented incidents suggesting these doorways might be fractures in time itself, places where past, present, and future momentarily overlap like pages in a book pressed too tightly together. Physicists call this the time loop theory, and it hinges on a radical idea that time isn't the straight arrow we experience, but more like a tangled knot of possibilities. Under normal circumstances, our perception keeps these threads neatly separated. But when a solar storm sends charged particles screaming through Earth's magnetic field, the resulting electromagnetic chaos might loosen time's weave at certain points. Think of it like striking a tuning fork against a glass pane. The vibrations create standing waves where reality becomes fluid. Structures built with conductive materials could act as accidental resonators, amplifying these effects until a doorway forms not just through space, but through time itself. The evidence isn't just photographic. In 1983, a team renovating Edinburgh's Mary King's Close uncovered a sealed chamber with walls covered in 20th century graffiti, names, dates, and even a crude sketch of a television set. The ink was carbon dated to the 1600s. Similar anomalies plague archaeologists worldwide. Roman coins in pre-Columbian strata, medieval armor rusting in Bronze Age tombs. Mainstream science dismisses these as hoaxes or contamination, but the timing tells another story. Nearly all appear in layers corresponding to known solar maxima, as if the very soil remembers when the sky burned. Perhaps the most chilling case comes from a declassified British military report from 1947. Radar operators tracking a solar disturbance over Stonehenge reported brief temporal echoes, ghostly images of the stones in different configurations flickering on their screens. One operator claimed to see figures in Neolithic garb moving through a version of the monument that matched aerial surveys from 3000 BCE. Skeptics chalked it up to equipment malfunction until a similar event occurred during the 2015 solar maximum. This time, thermal cameras captured heat signatures of human-shaped forms walking through solid megaliths before vanishing. The stones themselves registered a transient magnetic field strong enough to bend light, a hallmark of theoretical time loops. What makes this theory so compelling isn't just the anomalies, it's the consistency. Doorways described as humming with energy in medieval texts match modern accounts of localized time dilation near high-energy physics experiments. The blue-white edging witnesses report seeing around thresholds aligns with Cherenkov radiation, the glow produced when particles exceed light speed in a medium. Even the disorientation described by those who have crossed the dizziness, the metallic taste mirrors symptoms of astronauts exposed to cosmic radiation. But here's the twist that keeps physicists awake. If these doorways are temporal fractures, they might not just be passive windows. A recently discovered Babylonian tablet describes priests anchoring phantom doorways with copper rods during eclipses, suggesting ancient observers didn't just witness these events, they tried to control them. Modern labs are creeping toward similar breakthroughs. Quantum entanglement experiments have already demonstrated particles influencing each other across time. Scale that up to human dimensions during a solar storm, and suddenly, that 1920s gentleman in the castle might not be an accident. He could be the harbinger of a technology we're only beginning to glimpse. One where the walls don't just hide secret passages, but secret centuries. Ancient warnings carved into temple walls and whispered in forgotten tongues all carry the same ominous refrain: some doors are meant to stay closed. The Navajo speak of the dine adjective acute, spirit guardians who stand watch over thresholds between worlds. Celtic druids left inscriptions warning that the gates swing both ways, while Egyptian funerary texts describe shadowy keepers of the passages who ensure nothing unwanted slips through. These aren't just superstitions, they're consistent, cross-cultural red flags etched into history by those who may have understood the risks far better than we do. Modern science is now brushing up against those same warnings. Laboratories have already demonstrated that artificial electromagnetic fields can induce temporary distortions in materials taken from ancient doorway sites. The question isn't whether we can reopen these passages, it's whether we should. In 2019, a privately funded experiment in Nevada successfully stabilized a microscopic wormhole for 0.3 seconds using high-energy lasers and piezoelectric crystals. The team celebrated until their sensors detected an unexplained feedback loop energy signatures that didn't match their equipment's output, pulsing in patterns resembling Fibonacci sequences. One technician's journal entry reads, "It felt like something was testing the lock from the other side. The ethical parallels are haunting. When physicists first split the atom, they theorized about chain reactions but couldn't fully predict Hiroshima's aftermath. When CRISPR unlocked gene editing, we grappled with unforeseen mutations. These doorways present a similar threshold. Once we cross it, there may be no going back." Declassified government reports reveal that during Cold War experiments, multiple test subjects reported presences near artificial doorways, sensed but not seen. One Soviet physicist working on Project Zarya described an incident where a prototype archway began emitting low-frequency vibrations that matched the brainwave patterns of a dying person, despite no living beings being near the equipment. Yet the potential rewards could redefine civilization. Imagine harnessing these phenomena for clean energy, tapping into the zero-point energy fluctuations observed near temporary doorways. Medical researchers speculate that controlled exposure could unlock new treatments for neurological disorders, given how witnesses often exhibit enhanced cognitive abilities. Archaeologists whisper about peering through thresholds to finally witness history firsthand. But every breakthrough carries its shadow. The same technology might be weaponized, creating unstoppable soldiers who phase through walls or bombs that erase targets from the timeline itself. Perhaps the most sobering lesson comes from nature's own safeguards. Sites with frequent natural doorway activity often develop immune responses, localized geomagnetic anomalies that repel human approach, like the deadly gases that fill Hierapolis's plutonium chamber. Some researchers believe this isn't coincidence, but a planetary defense mechanism. The stones themselves seem to remember. Core samples from Chavin to Huanta show alternating layers of conductive and insulating minerals, as if the builders engineered fail-safes against uncontrolled openings. As we stand on this precipice, one truth becomes clear. Unlocking these doorways isn't just a technical challenge, it's a test of wisdom. The ancient warnings weren't about keeping us ignorant, they were about keeping us safe. Yet humanity has never been good at leaving mysteries untouched. Satellite arrays now monitor solar activity in real time, while quantum engineers draft blueprints for stable threshold chambers. The race is on, and the finish line might be a doorway we can't close. The real question isn't whether we'll succeed, but what might be waiting for us on the other side when we do. From ancient temples to modern skyscrapers, the mystery of solar event doorways forces us to confront how little we truly understand about the fabric of reality. These phenomena blur the lines between architecture and alchemy, between history and physics, leaving us with more questions than answers. Were they unintended side effects of cosmic forces interacting with human construction, or deliberate designs by civilizations who understood energies we're only now beginning to measure? The evidence suggests both possibilities and something even stranger. Consider the patterns we've uncovered. Doorways appearing exclusively after solar storms, their precision defying natural erosion. The recurring materials quartz, iron, copper, each known to interact with electromagnetic fields, the eyewitness accounts spanning millennia, all describing the same humming energy, the same uncanny distortions of time and space. These aren't isolated coincidences, they're pieces of a puzzle we've barely begun to assemble. Modern science can now explain how solar energy might temporarily alter molecular structures, but we still can't account for why these changes consistently form functional passages rather than random cracks. The implications ripple far beyond academic curiosity. With solar activity predicted to intensify in the coming decade, we may be entering an unprecedented era of doorway formations. Satellite networks now monitor solar flares in real time, while urban explorers armed with ground-penetrating radar scout ancient sites for hidden chambers. The race is on not just to document these phenomena, but to comprehend them before the next cosmic storm hits. Imagine standing before a newly appeared archway in your own city, knowing that stepping through could rewrite your understanding of reality. Would you cross the threshold? Perhaps the greatest lesson these doorways teach is humility. For all our technological advances, we're still newcomers to a universe that operates by rules we've barely glimpsed. Ancient cultures may have possessed insights we've since forgotten, encoded not in textbooks but in the very stones they shaped. As we move forward, balancing scientific rigor with open-minded wonder will be crucial. The answers we seek might lie in forgotten manuscripts, in quantum physics labs, or in the next great solar event waiting to reveal itself through walls we thought were solid. What happens next depends on us. Will we dismiss these occurrences as curiosities or recognize them as invitations to expand our knowledge? One thing is certain, the universe isn't done surprising us. As you go about your day, take a closer look at the buildings around you. That ordinary wall might be hiding extraordinary secrets, ones that could reveal themselves when the sun next speaks in tongues of fire. The greatest discoveries often begin not with answers, but with the courage to ask better questions. What will yours be? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this journey through history's hidden thresholds, hit subscribe, because the next mystery is always waiting just around the corner. Or perhaps just on the other side of the wall.